Hey everybody, I'm Andy. Welcome to Chronic Woodwork. Today we're going to cover my first video in a series of videos on how to build a cedar strip canoe. Before I get too far into it, I want to list two resources. First, Canoe Craft. It's kind of the Bible of canoe building. If you're interested in building one, I highly recommend investing in this book. If you're a visual learner like myself, they make a matching DVD. It's Nick Offerman's DVD to go with the book Canoe Craft. So if you're a visual learner like me, I'd highly recommend that as well. They're not terribly cheap, but if you're going to invest this much time and money into a project, you should definitely make sure you know how to do it right. So for video one, we're going to cover constructing the Strongback, which is this table you see in front of me. This is the form upon which the entire cedar strip canoe will be built. So it's important to start methodically, make sure it's accurate, make sure it's flat, and make sure it's real sturdy. Here we go. The Strongback construction process begins with roughing out the shapes we need for our Strongback. I bought 2 full sheets of 3/4 inch plywood, and I made an Excel sheet where each square represented 1 square inch of the sheet of plywood. Please feel free to pause the video and use this cut list for your own construction. Make sure you label everything clearly. It'll make it easier as you move along. I highly recommend ripping the sheets into the appropriate width and then taking them either to your miter saw or your crosscut sled and cutting them to length. Once all the cuts are complete, lay out the gables and use some clamps to hold everything in place. Make sure you mark your center lines, and then you're just going to be attaching all these members together. There's going to be a center box beam and then the 2 end beams that will ultimately all fit together. Do your best to ensure all the pieces are at 90 degrees to one another, to include whatever surface it is that you're using to assemble your Strongback. If at any point you find yourself not focused on the project, it's worth your time just to take a break, have a cup of coffee, and relax. If all goes well, the center beam should fit between the 2 end beams very nicely. Go ahead and clamp it together and then button it up with a few drywall screws. Okay, before I button up these legs, I want to give a quick run through of how it's all going to be assembled. First, the legs are going to go on the 3rd gable end. So 1, 2, 3. The legs are made of 3 main pieces. There's going to be 2 long pieces and a short one that allow these 2 long legs to sandwich around this 3rd gable. And then the legs, you'll see, has a gap, or the foot has a gap right in the middle. So these are going to slide in so that this surface is totally flush. And then this other leg will slide in and butt up with that leg. Now, one important part, and this came from the Canoe Craft book. There's lots of tips and tricks in that book that I strongly recommend buying it, but this is probably one of the most important. So as those legs have those gaps, these little foot pieces are going to slide in, and then you'll be able to adjust them, kind of micro adjust them up and down. Now that you hopefully understand the full anatomy of the Strongback leg, you can go ahead and clamp them together and screw them together with a couple more drywall screws. Move down to the other end and repeat the process. It probably goes without saying, but don't be shy with the number of screws you use. You want to be able to flip this thing over and stand on top of it to ensure it's nice and strong. Before attaching the top, go ahead and take the biggest level you've got and ensure the Strongback is as level as possible, and then you can go ahead and button on the top with some more drywall screws and check it for level once again. I identified that one of my corners was sagging a bit, so this is where the leveling feet come into play. I used some paper to shim up one leg and then use some screws to lock it in place. Once again, don't be shy with the screws. I gave the entire surface a once over and was pretty satisfied with the result. The final step of the Strongback construction is attaching some blocks that will allow the station molds to be attached to the Strongback. I bought a 2x4 and ripped them down to 1.5 by 1.5 blocks, each at 1 foot long. I marked the Strongback in 1 foot increments and attached the blocks, and I'll pretty much consider this phase of the project complete. Before you leave for the day, make sure you pick up your shop at least a little bit. It's going to make it a much more friendly and inviting atmosphere to enter the next day. That way you can get straight to work. See you next time. Thanks.